I worked the overnight at a gas station off the interstate for almost 2 years, and most of what I remember is the quiet. After about 2 in the morning, the world just empties out. The pumps go dark. The cooler hums. You start to hear the building breathe. There was a man who came in at 3:33 every night. Not 3:30, not 3:35. I checked the clock once because the coincidence bothered me, and after that I couldn't stop checking. He'd push through the door right as the second hand swept past. The little bell going off and he'd nod at me like we were old friends. He always bought the same thing, a black coffee and a single banana. He'd pay in exact change, count it onto the counter coin by coin, and leave without a word. I started having his coffee poured by 3:30 just to feel like I was ahead of something. One night I asked him where he was headed so late. He smiled, and it was a kind smile, a tired one. "Same place as always," he said. "Just takes me a while to get there." Then he left, and I watched him walk out past the pumps and into the dark, and I realized there was no car. There was never a car. In 2 years, I had never once seen him drive in or drive away. I told myself he lived nearby. People walk. It was fine. Then I got the flu and missed 3 nights. When I came back, my manager mentioned just in passing that the regular hadn't been in. "Which regular?" I asked. "The coffee and banana guy," I said. 3:33. She looked at me like I'd spoken another language. "There was no such man," she said. She'd worked that register for 9 years. Nobody came in at 3:33. I pulled the security footage for one of my old shifts just to prove it to myself. There I was at the counter. There was the coffee, poured early, steam coming off it. And at 3:33, the bell over the door rang, all on its own, and I watched myself smile and nod at the empty doorway and slide a coffee and a banana across the counter to no one at all. I quit that week. But I'll tell you something strange. I miss him. Whoever he was, whatever he was company. And some nights, around 3:30, I still pour a cup of coffee and leave it on the counter by the window, just in case he's still walking, just in case it still takes him a while to get there. The hospital only had 4 floors, and I cleaned all of them, but the 4th was the one nobody talked about. Night janitor. You learn a building's secrets when you're the only one awake in it. The 4th floor was closed. Had been for years, they said. Old surgical wing, never renovated, kept locked. But my key ring opened it, and the floors up there still got dirty somehow. So once a week, I'd go up and mop a hallway that no living person used. It was always cold, colder than the rest. The fluorescent lights buzzed in a way the others didn't, a low stutter, like they were trying to remember how to stay on. I'd mop from one end to the other and try not to look at the rooms. Room 412 had a bed in it, made up fresh. Every week made up fresh. The sheets, tucked tight with those hospital corners, I never learned. I assumed someone came up and did it, though I never met that someone. One week I left a sticky note on the pillow, half as a joke. "Who keeps making this bed?" I wrote. The next week the note was still there. Underneath my words, in a thin, shaky hand, someone had written, "I do. I'm waiting for my son. The doctor said he'd be out of surgery soon." I told myself a patient with dementia had wandered up. I told the day staff. They checked. No patients were missing. The 4th floor was locked, they reminded me, like I didn't carry the key. I kept cleaning it because it was my job, and because, honestly, I didn't want her waiting up there alone. Each week I'd leave a note. She'd answer. She talked about her boy, his laugh, the gap in his teeth, how he'd promised to take her fishing when he was better. Her handwriting never got any steadier. The last note I ever found said, "They're bringing him to me tonight. Thank you for sitting with me." The bed in 412 was stripped after that. Bare mattress. The cold lifted. The lights up there steadied and stopped their stuttering, and the fourth floor became just an old, empty floor, the way it was always supposed to be. I still don't know who she was, but I hope her boy came out of surgery. I hope wherever they went, somebody finally took her fishing. Parking garage security is the easiest job in the world if you can stand the boredom. 6 levels, 20 cameras, 1 chair, 1 long night. I'd sit in the booth and watch the little screens, and the cars would just sleep there in their rows, hour after hour, going nowhere. Camera 6 watched level 4. There was a woman who stood near the elevators on level 4, in the corner where the light didn't quite reach. She stood very still. The first night I noticed her, I thought she was waiting for someone, so I drove the cart up to check. The level was empty. Came back down, and there she was on camera 6 again, in the corner, still as a coat on a hook. I figured the camera was bad. A smudge, a trick of the angle, a water stain on the lens that the dim light turned into a shape. Cameras do that. The mind does the rest. But she moved, slowly across nights, never while I watched. Only when I looked away and looked back. Tuesday she faced the wall. Wednesday she faced the elevator. Thursday she turned a few degrees toward the booth, toward camera 6, toward me. By the next week she was looking straight into the lens, and I could not make out a face, only the patient suggestion of one, the way you sense someone in a dark room before your eyes adjust. I never felt afraid of her exactly. That's the part I can't explain to people. She didn't feel like a threat. She felt like she was waiting for me to understand something and getting closer to it, one night at a time. I asked the day guard casually if level 4 had any history. He got quiet. Years back, he said, a woman had been hurt down there, late, alone, by the elevators, in the corner where the light didn't reach. They added camera 6 after that, aimed it right at the spot, so it would never happen again with no one watching. I understood then. She wasn't haunting the corner. She was standing post. She'd been on the night shift longer than any of us, watching that dark patch of floor, so that nobody else would ever stand there alone and unseen. I worked there another year. Every night I'd nod at camera 6 when I clocked in. I've got it from here, I'd think. Get some rest, and she'd stand in her corner, faithful, and we'd watch the empty cars sleep together until morning. The toll booth on the old county highway saw maybe 40 cars a night after midnight. You get to know them. The trucker with the wind chime laugh. The nurse coming off shift who never had exact change. The kid in the loud orange car who always seemed to be running from something. And the gray sedan. The gray sedan passed every night at the same time, 1:15 give or take. Same plate. I knew it by heart after a while. I won't say it here, but I knew it. The driver always paid with 2 quarters, dropped into the basket, never the window, and drove on. I never got a look at his face. The dome light was always off. The windows always just dark enough. One slow night, I waved at the gray sedan as it slowed for the toll. The driver didn't wave back, but the brake lights flickered twice, like a nod. After that, we had a little ritual. I'd wave. The brake lights would blink twice. 40 cars a night, and that was the one that felt like a friend. Then one morning, the local paper had a story about the highway. A crash, years back. Foggy night. A gray sedan that went off the road, past the toll, and was never recovered from the river. The driver's body was never found. The date the paper printed, I did the math without wanting to. The driver had gone into the water at 1:15 in the morning. I didn't believe it. I'm not a believer. But the next night at 1:15, I watched the gray sedan slow for the toll, and I made myself walk out of the booth and into the road in front of it. And I looked. There was no one driving. The seat was empty. 2 quarters lifted up out of the basket of their own accord. The way a coin lifts when a hand you can't see picks it up. And the sedan rolled gently past me and on down the dark highway toward the river. I didn't wave that night. I just watched it go. And the brake lights blinked twice, 2 soft red blinks in the fog, the way they always did. The way a friend says goodnight. It still passes. 1:15, give or take. I've stopped waving. Now I just step to the window and say quietly, drive safe. It's a foolish thing to say to an empty car, but it's a long road wherever he's going, and I figure he's been driving it alone for a long time. A night auditor at a hotel is a strange animal. You run the numbers between 2 and 4 in the morning, in a lobby lit like a fish tank, while 300 strangers sleep in the rooms above your head. You are awake so that they can rest. That's the whole job. You keep watch. Our hotel had 11 floors, but the 7th was out of service that winter. Burst pipe. Water damage, the whole floor sealed off and dark while they waited on contractors. No guests, no keys that worked. 7 was just a black band in the middle of the building, and the elevator skipped it entirely. The front desk phone had a little grid of lights, 1 per room, that lit when a guest dialed down. Around 3 one morning, a light came on, room 712. There were no guests on 7. I knew that. But you answer the phone, that's the job, and so I picked up. Static at first. Then a voice. Far away, an old woman, very calm. "Could you send someone up?" she said. "I think I've been forgotten." I said there must be a mistake, that the 7th floor was closed. A long pause. Then softer. "Yes, I know. That's why I'm calling." The light for 712 went dark. I sat there with the dead receiver in my hand for a long time. It happened again the next night and the next. Always 712, always around 3, always the same calm, patient voice. I think I've been forgotten. And I started to understand it wasn't a threat or a trick. It was a request. Someone up there in the dark just wanted to be answered. Just wanted to know that someone downstairs was still keeping watch. So I stopped trying to explain it away. When 712 lit up, I'd pick up and we'd talk. She told me about a New Year's Eve in 1961, a band in the ballroom, a man who asked her to dance. She'd been so happy that night, she said, that she never wanted to leave. I think part of her never did. The contractors finally came in spring. They opened the 7th floor, dried it out, repainted it bright. The night they finished, 712 lit up one last time. I picked up. "They've made it lovely again," she said. "I think I can go now." And the line went quiet, gently, the way a song ends. 712 never called again, but on slow nights I still glance at that little grid of lights, and if one ever comes on from a floor that's supposed to be empty, I already know what I'll do. I'll pick up, I'll keep watch. Nobody on the night shift should have to feel forgotten. I restocked vending machines for a living, which meant I drove a van full of chips and soda down empty highways at hours when no sane person is awake. Mile 84 was the loneliest stop on my route. A little brick rest area, a bathroom, 3 machines, a vending alcove lit by one humming light, and around it, nothing but dark fields for miles. I always hit it around 2 in the morning, and there was always a man sitting at the picnic table outside in a trucker's cap with a thermos. He'd lift the thermos to me like a toast when my headlights swept across him. I'd nod back. We never spoke much, just cold one tonight or drive safe out there. Road talk. The kind of small kindness that keeps you going on a long shift. He told me once he was waiting on his ride. A buddy was coming to get him, he said. Truck broke down up the road. "Any day now," he'd say, and laugh and sip from the thermos. I must have seen him 100 nights. Same cap, same thermos, same patient wait. It took me an embarrassingly long time to wonder why a man whose truck broke down was still sitting at the same picnic table month after month after month. One winter night I pulled in and he wasn't there. The table was empty, dusted with snow, no footprints around it. I felt the loss of him more than I expected to. I went and restocked my machines, and on the side of the brick building, near the alcove, I saw a small bronze plaque I'd somehow never noticed in all those nights. It was a memorial. A trucker, it said, who'd had a heart attack at this rest stop years ago, waiting for help that arrived too late. There was his name. There, etched in the bronze, was a little engraving of a thermos. His friends had put it there. He always shared his coffee, the plaque said. I sat at the picnic table for a while in the cold. Then I did the only thing that felt right. I bought a coffee from my own machine and I set it on the table, steam rising into the dark, and I said, "Your ride's coming, friend. Any day now." I keep doing it every time I pass mile 84. A coffee on the table. A few words. He doesn't always show himself anymore, and that's all right. I think he just needed someone to wait with him. I think in the end, that's all most of us are doing on the night shift. Waiting. And it's easier when somebody waits beside you. I hosted the overnight slot at a small AM radio station, midnight to 5, spinning slow songs for the handful of souls awake to hear them. Truckers mostly, insomniacs, the lonely. You feel them out there in the dark even when the request line is silent. All those people driving and lying awake, tethered to you by a thread of sound. One night, the request line lit up at exactly 3. A woman's voice, soft and a little sad. "Could you play The Very Thought of You?" she asked. "He always loved that one." I said, "Of course," and I played it, and it was a lovely old thing, all strings and warmth. I dedicated it to her. She didn't give a name. She called the next night at 3 and the next. Always the same song, always. He always loved that one. I started keeping the record ready. It felt like a standing appointment. The loneliest hour of the night, and the two of us, and an old love song for a man she never named. I asked her once who he was. There was a silence full of static. My husband, she said, he drove these roads nights like you. I used to stay up and listen, so I'd feel close to him, and I'd call the station and ask them to play our song, so that wherever he was on the highway, he'd hear it and know I was thinking of him. Her voice caught. He didn't come home one night. A long time ago now. I didn't know what to say, so I just played the song. The next morning, curious and a little uneasy, I asked the station's old engineer about it. He'd been there forever. I described the calls, the 3 a.m. requests, the song. He set down his coffee very carefully. That woman, he said, used to call every night for years, decades back. A widow, kept the vigil for her trucker husband, requested that same song into the dark. Sweetest lady, he said. But son, she passed away. It has to be 15 years ago now. The line, he told me, had been disconnected on her end long before that. I went back the following night, half hoping, half afraid. At 3, the request line lit up. I let it ring a moment. Then I picked up, and before she could speak, I said, I know, you don't have to ask. He always loved this one. And I heard her very faintly begin to cry, the way you cry when someone finally understands. I played our song. I still play it every night at 3, whether the line rings or not. Somewhere out there on a long, dark highway, a man is driving home, and his wife is still staying up, still listening, still keeping the light on for him. The least I can do is keep the music going until he gets there. I was the overnight tech in a data center, one of those windowless buildings full of servers, humming racks stretching off into the dark in long rows we called aisles. Cold aisles. We called the gaps between them, because that's where the chilled air poured down to keep the machines from cooking themselves. It was loud with fans and cold as a January morning, and I was the only living thing in it from 10 at night until 6. You're never really alone in a building like that, though. There are cameras. There are sensors. The building watches itself. And the building that winter started watching something I couldn't see. The motion sensors in aisle 12 kept tripping. My monitor would flag it. Motion detected aisle 12 through, and I'd walk the long, cold corridor down to check, and there'd be nothing. Just the racks. Their little green lights blinking like a city scene from a plane. I'd reset it and walk back, and before I reached my desk, it would trip again. Motion detected aisle 12. I blamed a faulty sensor. I put in a ticket. They swapped it. It kept happening. Always aisle 12. Always between 3 and 4 in the morning. And then the temperature log started to show it too. A cold spot moving down aisle 12. Slow, steady walking pace. Colder than the cold air around it. A chill drifting between the racks, as if someone were strolling the aisle on rounds. I should have been frightened. Instead, I found myself walking down to aisle 12 each night around 3, just to stand there. The cold spot would move past me. I could feel it, a slow, cool pressure, like stepping into the shadow of something that wasn't there. And the green lights would blink, and I'd feel, oddly, that I was being checked on, that something was making sure the machines were running, that something still walked its rounds. I looked into it eventually, the way you do. The company that built the place, decades back, there'd been a man, the original night tech, the first one ever to work this floor. He'd loved the place by all accounts, worked it for 30 years, died of old age, retired, peaceful in his bed. But his daughter, when she cleaned out his things, found notebooks full of his rounds. He used to walk the aisles every night at 3, she said, and check every machine by hand. And he used to say he could never quite imagine leaving the place to fend for itself in the dark. I work somewhere else now, but I think about aisle 12 a lot. I don't think it was ever something to be afraid of. I think it was just a man who loved his work, still making his rounds, still keeping the machines warm and running through the coldest hours of the night. And honestly, knowing he was down there made my own shifts feel a little less lonely. We were 2 night techs, separated by 30 years, keeping watch together. If you ever work the overnight somewhere old and quiet, and you feel a cold spot pass you around 3 in the morning, don't be afraid. It's probably just someone who came before you, still on shift, making sure you're not alone out there in the dark. I ran the overnight at a 24-hour laundromat on the edge of town, the last lit-up window before the road went dark. After midnight, it was just me, the hum of the dryers and the slow tumble of other people's clothes. Folks came and went, mostly quiet, mostly tired. You learn not to ask questions at that hour. There was a woman who came every Thursday at 2 in the morning. She washed a single load, small things, a child's things, tiny shirts, little socks, a pale yellow blanket. She'd sit and watch them spin with her hands folded in her lap, and when they were dry, she'd fold each piece slow and careful, like it mattered, and carry them out into the dark. She never spoke much, just "cold tonight," or "thank you for keeping it open." I kept it open, that was the job. A warm lit room for whoever needed one. One Thursday, she didn't fold the clothes. She left them in the dryer, still warm, and she looked at me a long moment before she went. "He's getting too big for these," she said softly. "I don't think he needs me to do this anymore." And she smiled like something heavy had finally been set down, and she walked out, and the bell over the door went quiet. The owner told me later, when I described her, that years back, there'd been an accident out on that dark road past the laundromat. A young mother, a little boy in the back, only she had been pulled from it. She used to come in every Thursday after, he said, and wash his clothes, because it was the one ordinary thing she had left to do for him. She never came back after that night, but I folded those little clothes myself, and I kept them behind the counter a long while, and I kept the room warm and lit every Thursday at 2, just in case. I think she finally found her way to wherever her boy was waiting. I think she just needed to know somebody would keep the light on until she did. I worked overnight dispatch for a small county, the voice on the other end of the line when something went wrong at 3 in the morning. Mostly it was quiet. A fender bender, a barking dog, a lonely person who just wanted to hear someone answer. You'd be surprised how many calls are really just that. Someone making sure the world still picks up. There was a call that came in every few weeks, always around 4. An older man's voice, calm and a little faint, reporting the same thing each time, a stranded driver out on Route 9 near the old bridge needing help. I'd send a unit every time, and every time they'd radio back. Nothing there. Empty road. No car, no driver, no one. I started to dread the call, not out of fear, but out of a kind of ache. The man was always so polite. "There's someone out there who needs help," he'd say. "Please don't forget about them." And then the line would go quiet. I asked one of the older deputies about Route 9. He got still. Years ago, he said, there'd been a dispatcher, an old man, worked nights for decades, who took a call about a stranded driver near the bridge one winter night and, swamped and short-staffed, didn't get a unit out in time. The driver didn't make it. The dispatcher never forgave himself. He passed not long after, right there at his desk, on shift. After that, I understood the calls. He wasn't haunting me, he was still working. Still trying to send help to that stretch of road, still making sure that this time somebody answered, somebody went, somebody didn't get forgotten. So when the call came, I stopped dreading it. I'd say, gently, "I've got it. I'm sending someone right now. Nobody's getting forgotten on my watch." And the line would go quiet, but softer somehow, like a man finally able to rest. The calls come less often now. I like to think that means he's at peace. But on the slow nights, I keep one ear on the quiet frequency, just in case he needs to know that the desk is still covered, that somebody's still listening for the ones out there in the dark. I took a job tending a lighthouse the year they were phasing the keepers out. The light ran itself by then, all automatic, but they still wanted a person on the rock through the night, to watch, to call it in if anything failed. Just me, the wind, and the long, slow sweep of the beam over black water. There was another keeper there. I never hired on with anyone, and the mainland swore I worked alone, but I'd see him on the gallery up top some nights, a man in an old oilskin coat, looking out to sea. He never startled me. He felt like he belonged there more than I did. Sometimes I'd climb up and he'd be gone, but the brass would be freshly polished, the glass wiped clear of salt, the way I hadn't left it. One night the automatic light stuttered and died. Pitch black on the rock, and out past the rocks, I could hear an engine, a small boat, feeling its way in the dark, too close to the shoals. I fumbled for the manual switch and couldn't find it. And then the beam came back on, strong and steady, swinging out over the water, and I hadn't touched a thing. The man in the oilskin coat stood at the controls, and he held the light until that little boat found the channel and slipped safely past. In the morning, I read the logbook the old way, the paper one in the cabinet. The last handwritten entry was from a keeper who died on the rock in a storm decades back, having kept the light burning by hand through the whole blow so the boats could come home. His name was in the front of the book. It was the man on the gallery. I stayed 2 more years. I was never once afraid. How could I be? Every night, the loneliest job in the world. And I was doing it beside someone who'd loved it enough to never really leave. When the light finally went fully automatic and they closed the station, I climbed up one last time and said, "You can rest now. I'll see the boats home." I don't know if he heard, but the glass was clean and the sea was calm, and somewhere a beam was still turning in the dark. Night security at an art museum is the quietest work there is. Marble floors, dim emergency lights, 100 painted faces watching you make your rounds. People think it'd be eerie. Mostly it's peaceful. You get to know the paintings like neighbors. Gallery 9 held the old portraits, the ones nobody came to see anymore. Merchants and widows and children from centuries back, painted dark, hung in the back room. There was one, a portrait of an old woman in a gray shawl, that I always nodded to on my rounds. Force of habit. 2 a.m, just the two of us awake in the building. One night I came through Gallery 9 and a chair had been moved. One of the little guard chairs, pulled up in front of the old woman's portrait, facing it, like someone had sat there a long while, keeping her company. I figured a day guard left it. I put it back. The next night it was there again, in front of her again. I asked the curator about the portrait. She lit up. Nobody ever asked. The old woman, she said, had been a patron of the museum in its earliest days. A woman with no family who'd given everything she had to the place because she loved it, and who'd asked only that her portrait hang there so she'd never be alone. For years, the curator said, an old docent used to sit with her on quiet afternoons just to keep the promise. That docent had passed the winter before. I started pulling the chair up myself after that. 2 a.m, I'd sit with the old woman in the gray shawl for a few minutes on my rounds and tell her about my night, and the building would be warm and still around us. It cost me nothing, and no one as kind as her, I figured, should have to spend the long nights alone, just because the people who promised to sit with her had gone on ahead. The chair stays in Gallery 9 now. I leave it facing her. Somebody should. I stocked shelves overnight at a big grocery store, the kind that never closes. From 11 to 7, it was just the night crew and the long, bright aisles and the music playing soft to nobody. Around 3, the others would take their break in the back, and for a while, it'd be only me and the hum of the coolers and the squeak of my cart. Aisle 7 was the baking aisle. Flour, sugar, the little jars of spice. There was an old woman I'd see there, always around 3, in a buttoned coat with a small handbag, studying the shelves like she was deciding on something for a recipe. I'd say good evening. She'd smile and say, just getting a few things for Sunday. I assumed she was an early bird or couldn't sleep. Old folks keep odd hours. I never thought more of it. Until the night I mentioned her to my shift lead and he went pale. There was no customer, he said. The doors locked automatically at 11. Nobody got in or out until we opened. He'd seen her too, years back, and so had others. Always aisle 7, always 3, always getting a few things for Sunday. He told me the rest like it cost him something. The store stood where an old neighborhood market used to be decades ago. There'd been a woman who ran her whole life around Sunday dinner. Cooked for everyone, neighbors, strangers, anyone with nowhere to go. When she passed, they said half the street came because she'd fed all of them at one time or another. After that, I didn't mind her at all. Some nights I'd point things out. The good vanilla's on sale, I'd tell her. The flour's fresh in. She'd nod, pleased, and go back to choosing. I think Sunday dinner was just the thing she'd loved most, the way she'd cared for people, and she wasn't ready to give it up. Who could blame her? I still work nights. I still keep aisle 7 tidy and full, baking things faced neat and easy to reach, just in case she comes by around 3, getting a few things for Sunday. The least I can do is make sure she finds everything she needs. I tended a drawbridge over a slow river, the old kind that lifts to let the tall boats through. Nights were quiet work. A horn would sound from upriver. I'd raise the span, the boat would slide past with its lights on the water, and I'd lower it again and go back to my coffee. Hours of nothing but the river moving in the dark. There was a man who walked across the bridge most nights around midnight, a lantern in his hand, though the bridge had electric lights. An old bridge tender's lantern, the kind they used a century back. He'd cross slow, check the rail, look down at the water a while, and walk back the way he came. He never set off the gate sensors. I only ever saw him with my own eyes. I waved the first few times. He'd lift the lantern in answer, a small, warm swing of light. After that, it was our routine. Midnight, the lantern, the wave. On the loneliest nights, I found myself waiting for it. The county engineer set me straight one afternoon, half laughing, half not. The bridge had been tended by hand for generations before the motors came, he said, by the same family for most of it. The last of them, an old man, had kept it through floods and ice and never missed a night. He died at his post in a winter storm, lantern still lit, having raised the span one final time to let a barge pass safe. So that was my midnight visitor, still walking his bridge, still checking the rail, still keeping watch over the dark water the way his family had for 100 years. It didn't frighten me. It steadied me. The river is big and old and indifferent, and it was good to know someone who'd loved this crossing was still out there minding it with me. When they finally automated the bridge and let me go, I walked across it one last time at midnight. Halfway over, I lifted my coffee, like a lantern, out toward the dark. And I'd swear down at the far end, a small warm light lifted back. Drive safe, old-timer. The crossing's in good hands. I waited tables at an all-night diner off the highway, the kind with the long counter and the pie under glass and the coffee always on. The graveyard shift draws a certain crowd: truckers, night nurses, people driving away from something. I liked them. Everybody's gentler at 3 a.m. There was a man who always sat in the last booth, the one by the window at the far end. Older fellow, neat, a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie. He never quite finished. He'd watch the highway lights go by and nod thanks when I refilled his cup. He tipped in old coins, the kind you don't see much, left neat under the saucer. I never saw him come in. He was just always there by the time the rush thinned out. He told me once, when I asked if he was waiting on someone, that he was. My wife, he said, we used to stop here coming home. She always wanted the apple pie. He smiled at the window. I just like to sit where we used to sit. The owner had run the place 40 years. When I described the man in the last booth, she didn't laugh or look scared. She just got quiet and poured herself a cup. A couple used to stop here for decades, she said, on their long drives home. Same booth, same pie. The wife passed first. The husband kept coming alone, kept ordering the apple pie she'd loved, until one night he didn't come anymore. That was years back. I never minded him after that. I'd bring his coffee and a slice of apple pie, set it down soft and say, "On the house tonight." He'd nod, grateful, and turn back to the window and the passing lights, waiting, patient, for the headlights that meant she was finally home. We keep the last booth open now. Don't seat anyone there on the slow nights. And I still set out a coffee and a slice of apple pie by the window sometimes, when the highway's empty and the hour's late. Everybody deserves to wait for the people they love somewhere warm, even after, especially after. I drove the last train of the night on a quiet commuter line, the 250, the one that ran nearly empty through the dark from the city out to the end of the line. Most nights I'd carry a handful of stragglers, then a car or two of no one at all. Just me and the rails, clicking under us and the stations sliding past, like lit-up empty rooms. There was a conductor I'd see on the platform at one particular station, Elmwood, a small stop nobody used at that hour. An old railway man in a uniform a little out of date, holding up his lantern as we passed, the way they used to signal the all clear. I'd sound the horn soft in answer. He'd touch his cap. Every night, Elmwood, the lantern, the cap. It made the long, dark run feel less lonely. I mentioned him to the yardmaster once, just making conversation. He set down his clipboard. Elmwood hadn't been staffed in 30 years, he said. It was a ghost stop, lights on a timer, nobody posted there. But long ago it had a conductor who worked it his whole life, who stood on that platform every night and signaled the all clear to every train that passed, so the drivers would know the way was safe. He died not long after they cut the position. Loved that little station to the end. After that, the lantern at Elmwood meant even more to me. He was still working his platform, still telling every late train that the way ahead was clear, that someone was watching out for us, that we'd make it safe to the end of the line. 30 years gone, and still keeping the others safe through the dark. I couldn't think of anything less frightening than that. I'm retired off the rails now, but when I'm out late and I hear a far-off train horn in the night, I think of him at Elmwood with his lantern up, giving the all clear. And I hope someone, somewhere, is still answering him with the soft sound of the horn and a touch of the cap. The way ahead is clear, old friend. Thanks for keeping watch.